3 weeks before my wedding, I stood frozen in my living room, staring at a message that made my heart stop. At first, I thought there had to be a mistake. There was no way the man I was about to marry could betray me. There was no way my best friend, the woman who had prayed with me, cried with me, and helped me choose my wedding dress, could be the other woman. But the evidence was right there in front of me. In a single moment, everything I had spent years building came crashing down. The wedding, the future I dreamed of, the people I trusted most. Gone. What hurt the most wasn't losing my fiancé. It was discovering that the betrayal had been happening right under my nose for almost a year, while they both smiled in my face and pretended to love me. I remember falling to my knees and asking God a question I never thought I would ask. Lord, why would you allow this? What I didn't know then was that God was about to reveal a truth that would change my life forever. And 10 years later, the same woman who helped break my heart would desperately need my help to stay alive. But before I tell you how God turned my deepest wound into my greatest testimony, take a moment to subscribe and join the Redeemed Mind family. Because every week we share powerful stories that remind us that no betrayal, heartbreak, or setback is greater than God's ability to redeem it. Now let me take you back to the day I thought I was living my dream, only to discover I was standing at the beginning of God's better plan. Before everything fell apart, I truly believed I was living the life God had planned for me. My name is Vanessa Brooks, and at the time, I was 29 years old, actively serving in my church, surrounded by people I loved, and preparing to marry the man I thought God had chosen for me. Ryan Mitchell and I had been together for 3 years. He was charming, dependable, and respected by everyone in our church. Whenever people saw us together, they would smile and say things like, "You two are perfect for each other." And honestly, I believed them. But there was someone else who was just as important in my life. My best friend, Emily Parker. Emily wasn't just a friend. She was family. We met in church years earlier and became inseparable almost immediately. We attended Bible studies together, volunteered at church events together, and spent countless evenings talking about our dreams and praying for our futures. One Saturday afternoon, Emily sat across from me at our favorite coffee shop, grinning as I showed her pictures of wedding decorations on my phone. "Oh, Vanessa," she laughed, "this wedding is going to be beautiful. You're finally getting your happily ever after." I smiled. I still can't believe it sometimes. Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You deserve it." At the time, I believed every word she said. A few months earlier, Ryan had proposed during a church picnic. I can still remember how nervous he looked as he got down on one knee. "Vanessa Brooks," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "I don't want to spend another day without you. Will you marry me?" Tears immediately filled my eyes. "Yes!" I cried. The people around us erupted into cheers and applause. Ryan slipped the ring onto my finger and pulled me into a hug. For what felt like the 100th time that day, I silently thanked God. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my bed and opened my Bible. My eyes landed on a familiar verse. "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." Psalm 37:4. I smiled as I read it. In that moment, I felt incredibly blessed. I had a growing relationship with God. I had a loving fiancé, and I had a best friend who stood beside me through everything. As wedding preparations intensified, Emily became my right hand. She helped me choose decorations, compare venues, and even search for the perfect wedding dress. One afternoon, we stood together inside a bridal boutique. As I stepped out of the dressing room wearing a stunning white gown, Emily gasped, "Oh my goodness, Vanessa." She covered her mouth dramatically. "That's the one." I laughed nervously. "You really think so?" "I know so," Emily said. Then she pulled out her phone. "Wait until Ryan sees you in this dress. He's going to cry." The two of us laughed together. Looking back now, it's hard to believe how happy I was. Everything seemed perfect. The wedding was only weeks away. The future looked bright. And I had absolutely no idea that the two people standing closest to me were hiding a secret that would soon shatter my entire world. As the wedding drew closer, little things began to change. At first, I barely noticed them. Life was busy. There were invitations to finalize, vendors to call, seating arrangements to review, and 100 other details demanding my attention. So when Ryan Mitchell started acting differently, I convinced myself it was just stress. One evening, I called him on my way home from work. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail. That was unusual. Ryan almost always answered my calls. A few minutes later, he called back. "Hey, babe," he said. His voice sounded rushed. "Sorry, I was busy. Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just dealing with some work stuff." "Are you sure?" "Of course." I didn't think much of it. After all, we were only a few weeks away from our wedding. Maybe he was overwhelmed. A few days later, Emily Parker and I were having lunch together when Ryan's name appeared on my phone. Before I could answer, the call ended. I smiled. Probably another wedding question. But something strange happened. For just a second, Emily looked nervous. Her smile disappeared. Then it returned so quickly that I almost thought I imagined it. "You should call him back," she said casually. I frowned slightly. "Emily, are you okay?" "Of course," she replied quickly. "Why wouldn't I be?" I shrugged and let it go. Looking back now, that should have been the moment I paid attention. But trust has a way of blinding you. When you love people deeply, you don't look for reasons to doubt them. You look for reasons to believe them. As the days passed, Ryan became harder to reach. Sometimes he wouldn't answer for hours. Other times he seemed distracted when we were together. One evening, while discussing wedding plans over dinner, I noticed him glance at his phone. The screen lit up. For a brief second, I saw a message notification appear. The moment Ryan noticed me looking, he quickly flipped the phone face down. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. "What was that?" I asked. Ryan immediately smiled. "Nothing important." Then he reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Vanessa, you're not getting pre-wedding jitters, are you?" I laughed. "Maybe a little." "Don't worry," he said. "Everything's going to be perfect." I wanted to believe him. And because I trusted him, I did. But Ryan wasn't the only one acting differently. Around the same time, Emily started canceling plans. She stopped calling as often. And whenever I talked about the wedding, there were moments when she seemed strangely uncomfortable. One night, I called her after noticing she had ignored 2 of my messages. "Emily, you've been hard to reach lately." There was a brief pause. "I know," she said. "I'm sorry. I've just had a lot on my mind. Is everything okay?" "Yeah," she answered quickly. "Everything's fine." I accepted her explanation without question. After all, this was Emily Parker, my best friend, the woman I trusted like a sister, the last person on earth I would ever suspect of hurting me. But while I was busy planning my future, secrets were already growing in the shadows, and very soon, God would allow me to see a truth that would change my life forever. 3 weeks before my wedding, the life I thought God had given me came crashing down. It happened on a Thursday evening. I was at Ryan Mitchell's apartment, helping him finalize some details for the wedding. We had agreed to meet after work and review the seating chart together. Ryan was in the kitchen making coffee while I sat on the couch. His phone was lying on the coffee table. I wasn't snooping. In fact, I had never felt the need to. I trusted him completely. Then his phone lit up. A message notification appeared on the screen, and what I saw made my heart stop. "I miss you already. I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore." My stomach dropped. The sender's name wasn't visible. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Surely there was an explanation. There had to be. Ryan walked back into the living room carrying 2 mugs. The moment he saw my face, his smile disappeared. "Vanessa?" I slowly looked up. "What is this?" His eyes moved to the phone. The color drained from his face. Suddenly, the room felt too small, too quiet, too heavy. "Vanessa," he began. "No." I stood to my feet. My hands were shaking. "No. Tell me I'm misunderstanding this." Ryan set the mugs down. "Please sit down." The fear in his voice told me everything. Tears immediately filled my eyes. "Who sent that message?" Ryan lowered his head. He couldn't even look at me. "Ryan, answer me." Silence. Then finally he whispered, "Emily." For a second, I genuinely thought I had heard him wrong. "Emily?" He closed his eyes. My heart pounded. "No." I shook my head. "No, not Emily Parker." Ryan remained silent. The truth hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled backward and grabbed the edge of a chair to steady myself. "You're lying." "I'm sorry." "No!" I shouted. "You're lying!" My voice echoed through the apartment. Tears streamed down my face. Ryan took a step toward me. Vanessa, please, don't touch me. The pain was unbearable. Not just because of Ryan. Because of Emily, my best friend. The woman who helped me pick out my wedding dress. The woman who stood beside me in church. The woman who prayed with me. I couldn't breathe. I immediately grabbed my phone. My hands trembled as I called Emily Parker. She answered after the second ring. Hey, Vanessa. Her voice sounded normal. Too normal. Where are you? I asked. A pause. At home. Good. My voice cracked. Stay there. Vanessa? What's wrong? I'm coming over. I ended the call. Ryan tried to stop me. Vanessa, please, let's talk about this. I turned toward him. My eyes burned with tears. Talk? I laughed bitterly. What exactly is there left to talk about? Minutes later, I was standing in Emily's living room. The moment she opened the door and saw my face, she knew. Every bit of color vanished from her expression. Vanessa. I walked inside. Ryan had followed behind me. The sight of both of them standing there made me sick. I looked directly at Emily. Tell me it's not true. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't speak. That silence was answer enough. I felt my world shatter. How long has this been going on? Neither of them answered. I raised my voice. How long? Ryan finally spoke. His words destroyed whatever hope I had left. Almost a year. A year. Almost an entire year. While helping plan my wedding. While standing beside me at church. While looking me in the eyes and telling me they loved me. For a moment, I couldn't even process what I had heard. I just stood there staring at them. Two people I would have trusted with my life. Emily began crying. Vanessa, I'm so sorry. I looked at her in disbelief. Sorry? My voice broke. You're sorry? She covered her face and sobbed. But her tears couldn't erase what she had done. Nothing could. Then came the final blow. The wound that cut deeper than everything else. Ryan stepped forward and spoke quietly. I never meant for this to happen. I stared at him. What are you saying? Ryan glanced at Emily, then back at me. And in that moment, I knew. I knew before the words even left his mouth. I'm in love with Emily. The room went silent. Every dream I had, every plan, every prayer for our future, gone. Ryan had made his choice. And it wasn't me. As I stood there broken and trembling, I realized that the wedding wasn't the only thing that had been canceled that day. The future I thought I was walking into had just died before my eyes. The days that followed were some of the darkest of my life. For the first few mornings, I would wake up and forget what had happened. Then reality would hit me all over again. Ryan Mitchell was gone, Emily Parker was gone, and the wedding I had spent months planning was never going to happen. One of the hardest things I have ever done was calling vendors to cancel everything. The venue, the caterer, the florist. Each phone call felt like another piece of my heart breaking, but nothing compared to informing the guests. My mother sat beside me one evening as I stared at the stack of wedding invitations spread across my dining table. Vanessa, she said gently, you don't have to do this alone. I looked at her with tear-filled eyes. I don't even know what to say. She reached for my hand. Just tell the truth. The truth. I hated that word. Because the truth was humiliating. The truth was painful. The truth made me feel foolish. Over the next few days, I made call after call. Some people were kind. Others were curious. A few wanted details I wasn't ready to share. And every conversation forced me to relive the betrayal. Then came the gossip. Church was supposed to be a place of healing. Instead, it became a place of whispers. One Sunday morning, I walked into the sanctuary and noticed two women stop talking as I passed by. Another person looked at me with obvious pity. Someone else avoided eye contact completely. Maybe some of it was in my head. Maybe not. But when your heart is broken, even a simple glance can feel like judgment. I stopped attending social events. I stopped answering most phone calls. I withdrew from people. The loneliness became overwhelming. Some nights, I would sit in my apartment surrounded by unopened wedding gifts and cry until I had no tears left. I replayed everything in my mind. Every conversation, every memory, every moment I had missed the signs. The questions haunted me. How could Ryan do this? How could Emily do this? Had any of it been real? One rainy night, after weeks of carrying the pain alone, I finally collapsed beside my bed. I couldn't pretend to be strong anymore. I couldn't hold it together anymore. With tears streaming down my face, I cried out to God. Why? My voice shook. God, why? The room was silent. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed. Why would you let this happen? I trusted you. I prayed about that relationship. I thought Ryan was the man you chose for me. For a long moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own crying. Then my eyes fell on the Bible lying beside my bed. Slowly, I opened it. The page opened to a passage I had read many times before. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. I read the verse again, and then again. My circumstances hadn't changed. The pain was still there. Ryan was still gone. Emily had still betrayed me. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt since my world collapsed. Not happiness, not peace, just the faintest reminder that God had not abandoned me. Even in my brokenness, even in my confusion, even when I couldn't understand what He was doing, the Lord was still close. And although I didn't know it then, God was about to begin the slow, painful process of healing a heart that had been shattered by betrayal. Healing didn't happen overnight. I wish I could tell you that after reading Psalm 34:18, I woke up the next morning feeling completely better. But that's not what happened. The pain was still there, the memories were still there, and some days, the betrayal still felt as fresh as the day I discovered it. But little by little, God began putting the broken pieces of my life back together. Every morning before work, I started spending time in prayer and Bible study. At first, I didn't know what to pray. Most of my prayers sounded the same. Lord, help me. Lord, give me strength. Lord, heal my heart. Some mornings, tears would fall onto the pages of my Bible as I read. Other mornings, I simply sat in silence, waiting for God to speak. I also started keeping a journal. Instead of bottling up my emotions, I wrote everything down. My anger, my confusion, my disappointment, my questions. And slowly, those journal pages became conversations between God and me. One evening during a Bible study group at church, the lesson focused on trusting God's plans even when we don't understand them. The leader read a familiar verse. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11. I stared at those words. A future. At that moment, it was difficult to imagine having one. But for the first time, I began to wonder if maybe God wasn't finished writing my story. Around the same time, I started meeting with a Christian counselor. Week after week, she helped me process the betrayal in a healthy way. One afternoon, after listening to me talk about Ryan Mitchell and Emily Parker for nearly an hour, she asked a question that stopped me in my tracks. Vanessa, what if this wasn't God abandoning you? I frowned. What do you mean? What if this was God protecting you from something you couldn't see? I didn't answer, but her words stayed with me long after our session ended. Months passed, then more months. The pain didn't disappear all at once, but it slowly lost its grip on me. One morning, while reading my Bible, I came across another passage that seemed written specifically for my situation. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3:5-6. I closed my Bible and sat quietly. The truth was, I still didn't understand why any of this had happened. I still couldn't make sense of the betrayal. I still had unanswered questions. But as I sat there praying, I sensed God speaking gently to my heart, not with an audible voice, but with a peace that settled deep within me. It was as though He was saying, "Trust me with the chapter you do not understand." Fresh tears filled my eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of surrender. For the first time since my world had collapsed, I stopped demanding answers and started trusting God with my future. And not long after that, God brought someone into my life when I least expected it. A little over 2 years after Ryan Mitchell and Emily Parker shattered my heart, I was no longer merely surviving. By God's grace, I was healing. I had stopped asking why me every day. I had learned to trust God even when I didn't understand His plans. And that's when I met Marcus Brooks. Ironically, it happened at church. I had volunteered to help organize a community outreach event one Saturday morning. As I carried a box of donated supplies toward the fellowship hall, someone suddenly appeared beside me. Need some help with that? I turned around. Standing there was a tall man with kind eyes and a warm smile. Thanks, I said. This box is heavier than it looks. He chuckled. I figured. Without hesitation, he took the box from my hands. I'm Marcus Brooks, by the way. Vanessa Brooks. His eyebrows lifted. No relation, I hope. For the first time in a long while, I laughed. Not that I'm aware of. Over the next several weeks, I kept running into Marcus at church events, Bible studies, and volunteer projects. What stood out wasn't his appearance. It was his character. Marcus wasn't trying to impress anyone. He genuinely loved God. He treated people with kindness. He listened more than he talked. And unlike Ryan Mitchell, Marcus never made grand promises. Instead, he consistently lived out his faith. One evening after Bible study, Marcus and I sat outside the church talking. The conversation flowed naturally. No pressure. No expectations. Just friendship. As we stood to leave, Marcus smiled. I enjoy talking with you, Vanessa. I enjoy talking with you too. He nodded thoughtfully. Then let's keep getting to know each other. Months passed. Our friendship grew stronger. And when Marcus finally expressed interest in pursuing a relationship, he did something that surprised me. He didn't pressure me. He didn't rush me. Instead, he said, Vanessa, I know you've been through a lot. His voice was gentle. I care about you. But more importantly, I care about God's will for your life. If you need time to pray, I'll wait. I stared at him for a moment. After everything I had experienced, his patience felt almost unbelievable. So I prayed. A lot. I asked God for wisdom. I asked God for discernment. I asked God to protect my heart. One morning during my devotional time, I opened my Bible and my eyes settled on a familiar verse. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Ecclesiastes 3:11. I read the verse several times. Then I closed my eyes. And once again, I sensed God speaking peace into my heart. Not fear, not confusion. Peace. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt completely free to move forward. A few months later, standing in a beautiful church filled with family and friends, I walked down the aisle. Not toward Ryan Mitchell, toward Marcus Brooks, the man God had brought into my life at exactly the right time. The man who showed me what genuine love looked like. The man who would become my husband. And as I looked into Marcus's eyes and exchanged vows, I realized something powerful. What I once thought was the greatest heartbreak of my life had actually been the beginning of God's restoration. But what I didn't know was that my story with Emily Parker wasn't over, not even close. The day I married Marcus Brooks felt like stepping into a promise God had been preparing for me all along. The church was filled with family, friends, and the people who stood by me through my healing journey. As I stood at the entrance, holding my bouquet, my heart was calm in a way I never thought possible after everything I had been through. The music began to play, and slowly, I walked down the aisle. Not as the broken woman Ryan Mitchell and Emily Parker had left behind, but as a woman God had restored. Marcus stood at the altar, his eyes fixed on me the entire time. When I finally reached him, he whispered softly, "You look beautiful." I smiled through tears. "So do you." In a very husband way, I whispered back. He laughed quietly, and for a moment, everything felt light again. During our vows, Marcus held my hands and said, "Vanessa Brooks, I promise to love you with patience, honor you with my life, and walk with you in God's purpose." Tears filled my eyes as I responded, "I choose you, Marcus. Not just today, but every day God gives us." And when the pastor said, "You may now kiss your bride," I felt something deep inside me settle completely. God had restored what betrayal tried to destroy. Not just my relationship, but my identity, my joy, my future. Later that evening at the reception, surrounded by laughter and celebration, I stood beside Marcus holding his hand. I should have felt like my story was complete, but God was not done writing it yet. Because as I looked across the room, a thought crossed my mind that I hadn't felt in years. Emily Parker. I whispered quietly to myself. I thought I would never see her again. I paused, then continued softly. I was wrong. 10 years later, a phone call would bring Emily Parker back into my life. And God would ask me to do something I never imagined possible.